What up, data nerds? I'm Luke, and welcome to my channel where I make data visualization easy. In this video today, we're going to be talking about functions, and functions are really important in writing code when you find yourself starting to repeat certain tasks over and over again. Functions are really great at removing that repetition and putting it into one single function. So for this video, we're going to be going over expanding further on the use case of functions within Python. Then from there, moving into what built-in functions are inherent to Python that you have access to right now. And then the majority of the time is actually going to be spent on the next portion where we're going to go into understanding the basics of building functions, such as how to pass in arguments. And then we'll go into advanced features of functions, such as using keyword arguments and unpacking arguments. Finally, we're going to wrap it up all together. We're going to do an example problem with the Office dataset, and we're going to modularize a function, if you will, to make it to where we can count the lines of script that a certain actor has. So with that, let's jump right into my computer. So here we are in my MacBook with VS Code up and a Jupyter notebook running. So the first portion is going to be looking at the use case of functions, and we're just going to go with a simple example. Say my boss provides me with a list, and this list has some sales numbers within it, and he's given me this job to analyze to make sure that the numbers are even. I've kept the list simple at 5 numbers, but I mean, imagine it could be thousands of numbers. And so what I did is I went ahead and I built a for loop that goes through this list. And don't worry too much about the code, but it just goes through this list and checks to see if there's even or odd numbers and then outputs results. And so if I do Shift Enter, we get that, hey, list of sales is not all even numbers. And looking up at this list, we can easily see that it's not. So this is great. But then let's say this isn't really repeatable. Now let's say our boss provides us with another list. So we'll say gym sales. And now we need to do the same evaluation. We could take this for loop. I can copy it and paste it right below here. And then from there, okay, I'm using for num in Dwight sales for the for loop. I want to do for num in gym sales. And then I would rerun it. And what's going on here? Shift Enter. And we're not able to run it because we're running into errors because our code is wrong. We still have this Dwight sales right here. I forgot to change this as well. So I changed this to gym sales. And we do Shift Enter. Okay, now it's working. And we can see, hey, list is even numbers. And we have, checking this list, we can see, hey, it's even numbers. And then say, now we have the gym's sales completed. Then our boss comes back and is like, hey, I have this number now with Kevin's sales. Okay, so at this point, it's like, we need to make a function out of this because we're just repeating ourselves here. So let's see what it would look like with a function. So here we are with the new and improved function. And as you can see, once again, don't focus too much what's going on in the code here. I'm just trying to show that this is a function, and we've basically taken our for loop from above and compacted it into a function, which we'll go over more about how to build in a second. So now that we've built this function called even checker, and I go ahead and press Shift Enter. Now, every time that I get some sort of list, such as Dwight sales, I can do even checker, pass in Dwight sales, and do Shift Enter, and get, hey, it's not all even numbers. I get to gym sales, I can get even checker as well. I can take gym sales, Shift Enter, and it says, hey, it is all even numbers. And so on. If I wanted to check Kevin's as well, I could check his. So that's the point, the purpose of functions. It's so that you're not repeating yourself and having to do this copy and paste of repeats and running into those issues like I did where I didn't check that I needed to replace certain items within a code snippet. So next, let's look at built-in functions before we get into user-defined functions. But built-in functions are just functions that we have inherent to Python. So in this notebook, which I have a link in the description below, You can navigate to the link here within the notebook, and it will show you all of the different built-in functions within Python. And these are all the different ones. And let's go over some examples real quick. So the first one that you're probably well aware of that you've seen me use before, the print. And we can do a hello world. And this is just going to print something to the console. And we can also do things like get the absolute value of something. So what's the absolute value of -1? It's 1. And then finally, my favorite, one of my favorite functions is the help function. So if we needed help on a function, we could write help and then the function's name, and it would tell us what this function does. So yeah, so functions just have this nomenclature, which is really important, right? That you have your, whatever the name of the function is, and then you need the parentheses, and sometimes it has arguments and sometimes it doesn't, passed inside of it. But the main thing is that there's parentheses that execute this function. So now moving into user-defined functions. Let's go over the basic structure first. So the first thing is, we have a def at the beginning, that means define. Then you have the function name along with parentheses and maybe some variables that you'll include in there, and then the colon. Underneath it needs to be indented, but you would have the code to execute, and this could be any number of lines. And then at the bottom, you have an optional return statement, and this would be the object you would want to return if you were calling the function and assigning it to something. So for the basic example, we'll start with, let's do def, and then we'll do my func, and this is whatever the name that you're going to give it. From there, we do parentheses, and remember, we can assign it a variable or not, so we'll leave it blank for right now. If I were to do shift-enter right now, it's going to give me an error because it expects some line of code and execution. If we wanted to just do a placeholder, we learned about previously in one of my other series, the pass argument. So we could just put pass right here, and it would capture that, hey, this is a function and it's no longer going to throw an error. And then if we wanted to call this function, we could do my func. So doing it without the parentheses doesn't necessarily execute it. It just gets the object of the function. And as we can see, hey, this just gives like a function object. But whenever we put the parentheses, it actually calls the function. And right now our function is not doing anything. So whenever I press shift enter, nothing's appearing. So let's take this function further. So let's just do we'll do a print statement. Say we had a repetition. We needed to repeat this. So good morning, Dunder Mifflin. And we did shift enter. Now, whenever we come down here to run this function, shift enter, we would get, hey, good morning, Dunder Mifflin. So to build upon this further, let's say that routinely this phrase, good morning, Dunder Mifflin, it changes. So we don't want to necessarily print every time we run my function. We don't necessarily want to print out good morning, Dunder Mifflin, maybe good evening, Dunder Mifflin, or something like that. So what I could do is I could define a variable down here. So text in this case is good morning, Dunder Mifflin. And from there, I could put in, hey, we want to pass in an argument of text, and we want to print that text. And running shift enter. And now going down here, we have my func, and it now requires that text input. If I were to run this without putting text in, you're going to see I get my func missing one required positional argument, text. And we can look up here, it does require one. So now putting in that text, shift enter, we get, hey, we get the text that we had up here into our function. Now it's important to understand you don't have to use, just because this variable name is text, that doesn't mean you have to use that same name in here. So if I wanted to, I could do a line and change this to line. The important thing is that, so running shift enter, this is evaluated now. The important thing is that whatever I pass into here matches this variable above it. So if I run this, shift enter, I would still get the good morning Dunder Mifflin. So let's take this a step further for, let's say we have multiple values. Let's say we know Dunder Mifflin is usually going to stay the same, but the greeting is going to change frequently throughout the day. So we could put two arguments here, greeting and company. And from there, put in, hey, we want to print greeting and company. And need to delete this. And then from here, we could do the same thing. Hey, we need a greet. And we also need a company. So assign this. Okay, so now we have this greet and company defined down below in variables. I can run this, shift enter, and then my func I want to pass in, right? We want to pass in the greet and the comp. And when I press shift enter, I get, hey, good morning, Dunder Mifflin. And then if I wanted to change this to good evening, I can get shift enter. Okay, and we're still getting it. So that good evening, Dunder Mifflin. Taking it another step further, we can also assign variables within our function itself. So say we know that Dunder Mifflin isn't going to change as the company often. I can take this and I can actually place it within the function itself. So now company is assigned to Dunder Mifflin. And I can go ahead, I'm going to comment this out for now. We're not going to use it. And so if I were to run this, evaluate it, shift enter, and then evaluate this, shift enter, we would get, hey, good evening, Dunder Mifflin. So it's automatically inherent to this. Oops, sorry, I did this wrong. I need to remove this. So we no longer have to put in that second argument. Only one positional argument is required. And if I do shift enter, we still get that good evening, Dunder Mifflin. But just to show, we could put a variable in here. So I could say, hey, competitor equal to, we'll say, prints paper. And then if we wanted to, we could do my func greet and also competitor. And that will put the competitor in here. And then when I run shift enter, it will, instead of using the default of Dunder Mifflin, it will use what we assigned of the prints paper to do the good evening prints paper. So now for the final portion of the basics of functions, so the return statement. So let's say instead of we wanting to print this good evening competitor or company, we want to return something. So in data analysis and data science, usually what you find is we're returning some sort of value. So in this, we're going to keep the same thing. We can do a return statement, and let's do the length of greeting, and we want to do this to also the length of company. And all this is going to count the string. So in this case, company. If it were Dunder Mifflin, it will count each one of these characters in here and provide us with a final value returned as the function. So using shift enter to evaluate, and then from here running my func, we can see, hey, it returns a value. And so we could actually, if we wanted to, we could assign this to a value and then print this value, if we will, and do shift enter. And so we get, hey, 24. So moving on to advanced functions within Python. We're going to be talking about the unpack operator. So specifically, you'll see this as an asterisk, and we're going to get to what's the use case of this. And you'll frequently see this with the argument args, A-R-G-S. So let's say we have this function built, and the function is not really that special. It just takes a list of sales and returns the sum of those sales. So in the case of Dwight, I can see, hey, these are his sales. And if I wanted to, I can do add sales and put in Dwight as the argument. And whenever I run this, I get 576 because that's what the total of this is. But now let's say my boss provides me with another list and it has Jim's sales as well. So there's multiple different ones and he wants them all totaled together. If I were to take this and do add sales and put in the Dwight sales and then also put in the Jim sales and try to run this, it would give me this type error right here that says, hey, add sales takes one positional argument, but two were given. So this is where we could build a function to use an unpack operator to provide basically an infinite amount of items that we want to use within this function. So for this, we need to understand the unpacked operator. So let's just say we had this a list of the Dwight sales, Dwight sales, and also the Jim sales. And we do Shift Enter, and then we also see what it looks like. And what this is a tuple of lists. And so if we needed to unpack that, we could, we need to do a print statement, but same concept. So we do Shift Enter Print. If we wanted to unpack it, we could do this asterisk in front of it. And from there, what's going to happen is it's removed it from those tuple, and it's going to provide it in an unpacked manner, and then we can use it within our function. So modifying our function slightly, I'm going to add it in right here. And what we can do is we can say you put this asterisk and then whatever you want to call the variable, sales list, and then you can use it within the function itself, however many it may have. So don't worry too much about the code here. But what's going on is the same principle that we had above, where we're trying to get the sum of all the different lists and return that value. So if I do a Shift Enter, we evaluate it. And then now doing this again, if we do the add sales and we put in Dwight sales, we do a Shift Enter, we get, well, one, it prints the sale so that way we can see it. And then it gets, hey, this is the value for it. Okay, now let's say we wanted to add in another one. So if we're going to add in Jim's sales, do Shift Enter. Oh, it's now adding all of these. And we can even take this even further and even add in Kevin's sales and do Shift Enter. And it adds up all of these. And it uses this unpack operator to feed them in one by one into this function. One last note on this is you'll typically see the nomenclature for this. Above we used sale list next to the asterisk, but you'll typically see the keyword args used in this, and that's just sort of standard practice in the industry to use that, but feel free to use whatever variable name you want within there. Moving on to the double asterisk, which is the unpack operator for dictionaries. We're going to spend much time as this because it's a very similar concept to the unpack operator for iterables. But for this, you typically, the nomenclature is, if you see a double asterisk, you see the kwargs, where single asterisk is args. And what this does is unpack dictionary-like items. And then from here, I just have a simple function where it's going to go through the different key and values of a dictionary and print those things. So I can go ahead and paste this function, so the kwarg function, and pass in these values. And they're in a dictionary-like format where you have a key and then you have a value with this equal sign. And if I press Shift Enter, I can get it printed for those key and values. And if I wanted to add even more, I could add receptionist equal to Pam and do a Shift Enter. And hey, as we add these keyword arguments, it will continue to unpack it. Moving on to the application of what we just learned with functions. So now we're going to go in and actually apply a lot of the different concepts we had into a scenario, if you will, of data analysis and using functions. So we have the task to count the lines of a given actor for the script of the Office. And so if I go to this CSV file, which I have right here, and I've loaded this CSV file into Excel, but what this has, it has all the lines from the Office of all 9 seasons. And for each of the script lines, it tells who the actor is and down to the scene, everything like that. So the main thing that we care about from this data set is we're trying to count how many lines an actor has. So we're trying to count how many times, in this case, we want to find Michael, how many times Michael appears within this list. And so what we're going to be doing is building on this. So let's go back to VS Code. So yeah, let's look at the approach now. We're going to make this a function because the actor name could change on who we want on this, and we want a standardized process for counting this. So looking at the approach, we can say, 1, we want to create a function. So for 1A, we want to open and read the CSV. From there, we want to make a list of all the times that the actor, that is the actor of interest, appears. And then from there, we want to actually count that list to see how many times the name appears. And then, yeah, feed the names to that function. Okay, so that is the approach. Let's get into building this. So if you've been following along in this tutorial, I've gone through a couple times now of reading a CSV, and this is going through and reading the CSV, and we'll just quickly cover this. What's going on here is for the first line, we're opening the file itself of the CSV. So this is the directory we're located within. This is the notebook right here of the 5 functions. And then the CSV is in this Office data directory under scripts, the Office CSV. So it goes in here, it opens the CSV. Then from there, we use the CSV module to read that CSV file. And then from there, we assign it to that variable CSV reader. And that CSV reader is now an iterable that we can iterate through. And we're using we print the fifth row, the fifth item of the first row, and then break. And so just to show from the CSV file, this is with Python indexed at 0. We get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is getting the speaker column, and that's the column of interest that we care about. And then, yeah, it's always good practice to close it. So just running this to see, we expect for the row 5, yeah, we get the speaker. And going back here, yep, we're getting the speaker right here. Okay, so we've gotten this, we've basically accomplished the first step so far, right? But remember, we're wanting to create a function that does this. So let's wrap this in a function. So we'll say, hey, def actor counter will be the name of this. And then all of this inside, I will just tab this over, and it will all be within within this function itself. And so if I were to run actor counter underneath, I would get, yep, speaker. So, okay, so we've done steps 1 and 1A. Okay, so moving on to 1B, we're gonna make a list of times an actor appears. So we wanna feed this function a variable, and for the time being, I'll create a variable called actor, and we'll set this equal to Michael. And then from there, we want to feed this into here. So we do want to feed into this function here, but we need to create it inside of here. So we'll just call this actor as well. So actor is going into this function here. And instead of this for loop, we actually want to just do a list comprehension to, hey, we want to make a list of the times the actors appears. So if I were to, from here, we're going to make the list of actor. And if you're curious about list comprehension and you haven't seen my previous episode, be sure to check that out. We're going to be using list comprehension for this. So what do we want? Remember, we wanted row 5. And remember, we were using that for loop before, so we do the same thing for list comprehension. So for row in CSV reader, so we're going through each of the rows in the CSV reader. We're grabbing row 5, but we only want row 5 if row 5 is equal to that actor name, okay? And then just to see, I wanna print this list actor. It's always good to just troubleshoot along the way. And we're gonna do a shift enter. Okay, yeah, and We have all the list of the Michael itself that's printing within here every time that he appears within that CSV. Okay, so yeah, we've accomplished 1A, 1B. Now we're going into, we want to count the list. So we have this printing right now. We don't really need this. We have this list actor. And what we want to do is return the length of list actor. Okay. And yeah, let's run this again. Shift Enter. Okay, looks like Michael appears about 12,000 times. And so yeah, we can feed in that. We can also feed in other characters as well. So if I wanted to see what is Pam, I can remove this variable now and just put in Pam and see, okay, Pam's about 5375. Feed in Jim. 6814. Okay, so now we've, so now we have this function that goes in and counts for the different actors. So just to take it a step further, we say, hey, feed the names to that function. So let's say maybe we may get a list of actors that we want to investigate for this. And what we could do is we can make a for loop, if you will, that cycles through this function to try out all of these different actors, and then uses these values as the key and assigns the value to the value. So basically make a dictionary of this. So let's do this. So let's say actor dict equal to blank. And then we'll make a for loop. So for actor in actor list, we want to do this function, right? So that actor counter. And we want to, remember, we need to feed in those names. So we're going to feed them in one by one. And what we're wanting to do is, remember, it returns a value. And we're wanting to basically build a dictionary of these items. So what we can do is we can assign this. So actor dict, and then for the key, we'll use the actor name. And then for the value, we'll use what's returned from the function. And so, yeah, we then can print it out. So actor dict, do Shift Enter. And bam, right here, we can see it. So that list that we provided uses a for loop to go through and check each one of the actors that we defined in this function, actor counter, and it will provide us all the actors of interest that we care about and the number of lines that they had within the office. Bam! So there you have it. That is functions. And so if you find yourself ever writing code that becomes repetitive, you're copying and pasting code, do yourself a favor and start using these functions within your code to make your life a lot easier. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about Lambda functions and sort of how list comprehension relates to for loops. Lambda functions relate to functions, and it's a more concise way to write those functions. So as always, smash that like button if you found this video useful. Also consider subscribing if you're following along with this tutorial. And finally, drop a comment down below if you have any questions on functions. With that, see you in the next episode.